In this video, I'm going to be reviewing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64. And before I start, I got two notes I need to mention. And those two notes are that I got 99.99% completion on the game, and I emulated this game on my PC with Rosalie. Now, as for the review itself, I am giving this game a stamp of play it, and that's it. I'm done with the video now. See ya. Alright, fine, I'll actually try to write more than that. So I guess we can start with the most obvious thing. This is the first 3D Zelda game of the series, and I think Nintendo did a pretty good job with it. I definitely enjoyed this game way more than any of the 2D ones that I've played so far. Now I will say that the Game Boy Color version and remake of Link's Awakening takes a close second place for a reason that I will talk about later. Going back to the 3D stuff though, I think Nintendo did translate most things pretty well from 2D to 3D. I also think that them trying out a 3D Zelda game was a good idea because 3D just adds an infinite amount of complexity, or I guess I should say that 3D adds an infinite amount of possible complexity, whereas with 2D it's never going to reach the same level of possible complexity as 3D. The gameplay formula for Ocarina of Time is pretty close to the same as Link's Awakening and A Link to the Past. You do a temple, you can do optional side quests, you have to do something to get inside the next temple, you do the next temple, repeat. I think them copy pasting the gameplay formula is fine, especially since this is the first 3D Zelda game. I guess I can dissect the actual gameplay itself. A core gameplay mechanic in Ocarina of Time is time travel. You have the past and the future. In the past, Link is a child, and in the future, Link is an adult. There are things that are exclusive to both of them, those being the items that each one can use, the temples that can be accessed, there's side quests that are exclusive to each, and there is a good chunk of them that require both. Most of the areas are somewhat changed, and NPC locations are different. After writing that down, those differences don't sound very big. I guess there will probably be some people that think there's very little difference between Child Link and Adult Link. I think that there is enough differences between them, but I can see how a lot of people would think otherwise. Another important thing about the time travel is how you switch between Child Link and Adult Link. You can switch between them at the Temple of Time. If you are Child Link, you can switch to Adult Link by pulling the Master Sword out of the pedestal inside the Temple of Time. If you are Adult Link, you can switch to Child Link by putting the Master Sword back into the pedestal inside the Temple of Time. Unfortunately, this is the only way to switch between the two. You can't do it on the spot instantaneously anywhere in the world. This limits the complexity of the time travel by a lot. The game could have been more complex if you could switch between the two at any point in time and anywhere in the world. If it wasn't obvious with the previous statement, I do wish you could switch between the two on the spot instantaneously and anywhere in the world. I think if done right, it could have and would have made the game more interesting. However, it's also fine the way it is. Next, I want to talk about movement. Movement is not too interesting. Since the game is 3D, you can walk in every direction. You can backflip, sidestep, and do a forward slash with your sword. There's also climbable walls in the game. The movement for those is super simple: up, down, left, right, and letting go of the wall. You can also roll, which the only two uses I found for that is to avoid fall damage and to go slightly faster when you're going downhill. Something I just realized is that there's not a proper jump in this game. Like, there's no jump button. Maybe that's something that will be in Majora's Mask or a later Zelda game. So this is the last section of the video that I'm recording. I'm recording this section while I'm editing the video. Something I forgot to talk about, to even write about, was Z-locking the camera. So Z-locking is pretty much what it sounds like. It'll lock the camera onto an enemy. That way you can see what that enemy is doing while you're trying to fight it. I wanted to also talk about the camera quality of this game, the quality of the camera in this game, and it sucks. Well, it's not like horrifically bad like Mario 64, but it's still not very good, and it's just something I wanted to point out. I'm not going to bother digging through my footage or recording new footage for this section because I'm being lazy and I don't feel like it. So I'm just gonna need you to take my word on it about the camera. And the Z-locking feature, it works pretty well. I think it might have been better if they didn't do the black bars, but it still works pretty well. It could be better, but it still works pretty well for what its purpose is. So that's it for this section. Next, I want to talk about combat. The combat is very simple. I kinda already explained the moveset Link has for combat during the movement section. I guess just to explain how the sword works a little bit more, you have a button for swinging it, and on the first swing it will go vertical, and every swing after that it will go horizontal. You can also use some items during combat as well, like you can use bombs. Bow is actually a big one in the game. The slingshot and the hook shot can be a good use in some instances, but not very many. The same thing applies to the boomerang. There's also bomb shoes, but I only use them when it was a requirement because during combat, bomb shoes are not the best option. The reason they are not the best option is because of the way they work. The way they work is that when you place them down, they start moving somewhat forward in a zigzag direction from the point that you place them. I think while the combat is very simple, it does help to a degree to keep the game interesting while you're not doing puzzles or running around in temples. I want to go slightly more in depth about the items. Most of the items are cool, but unfortunately this game does have item bloat in it, but I don't think it's extreme, and I don't think it's going to be super noticeable to anyone else besides me. The number one thing that is item bloat in this game is the Goron's bracelet. I tried to Google how many times it gets used in the game because I wanted the exact number instead of saying 1 or 2 times, but sadly all I found was information on speedruns for the game. Something kind of odd I found from the speedrun information is that apparently if you skip the Goron's bracelet and you get the silver gauntlets, you can't lift the rocks that are in your way at the forest temple. Same thing applies to other liftable rocks too. So I guess if you're doing speedruns, the bracelet is important, but in regular gameplay, it's something that Nintendo didn't need to put in since it only gets used about once or twice in the whole game. Alright, well, I didn't mean to get sidetracked talking about speedruns, but as for other items that don't get used very much or don't have very many applications are Deku Sticks, Deku Nuts, Megaton Hammer, Dense Fire, and all 3 arrow types. Then you got the 2 boot types and the Lens of Truth that are in the middle on usage. And last you have the Mirror Shield and Golden Gauntlets that you don't get until you're pretty close to the end of the game. Well, the Golden Gauntlets, you literally obtain them in the final temple, so because of how late in the game you obtain these 2 items, they don't get used very much. Something I almost completely forgot about because of how useless it is, the Stone of Agony. The idea is that this thing enables the rumble pack for the N64 and will make the controller rumble when it finds a quote-unquote secret. From what I looked up, all it finds is the underground caves. Speaking of the Mirror Shield, I do want to talk about that item by itself. The idea of reflecting light off of the Mirror Shield onto the suns and other objects is a cool idea, but it doesn't work very well. The reason it doesn't work very well is because trying to stand in the right spot so the light can actually hit the target is a little bit difficult, but the more difficult part is actually moving the shield around trying to get it to hit the target. This becomes extremely obvious with the final Spirit Temple boss. I hope in the 3DS version the Mirror Shield works a lot better. I guess the next thing I should talk about is the temples themselves, since that is a pretty major part of the game. I liked all of the temples in the game except the water temple. There's also 2 dwarf temples in the game, and those are Bottom of the Well and Ice Cavern. I actually don't mind Ice Cavern being a dwarf temple because I think a full-fledged ice temple would suck. I don't like the idea of spending a ton of time slipping, sliding around. I already didn't like it in the Ice Cavern, and I didn't like it in the previous Zelda games that I've played so far. The only reason I'm not outright saying that I hate the Ice Cavern is because it was short enough to be tolerable. As for the water temple, it was just confusing. The basic idea is that the temple is divided into 3 different different floors, and you can change the water level. For example, you could have the water be at floor 1 and then rise it up to floor 2. Another example is that the water level could be at floor 3 and you could lower it to floor 1. I think it would have been better if there was just one room that you could control the water level from instead of the sides being super far apart from each other. I know that this would make the temple a lot simpler, but I think it would have made it simpler in a good way. I also don't like the way you have to get around in this temple either. The best I can do to explain it is that since you can't really swim in this game, you have to use the iron boots, and that'll take you to the bottom of the temple, and then you pretty much have to go around in circles a lot. You also have to keep adjusting the water level, which also contributes to making you have to go around in circles. Now, I will say, most of the time when I stream this game, and most of the time when I stream in general, I'm very tired, so that might have affected my ability to use common sense and use my already weak logical deduction skills. However, I'm very positive that if I played this temple while I was fully awake, I would still be confused, and I would have probably still pulled up a guide. Now, as for my favorite temple in the game, my favorite temple was the Fire Temple. The reason the Fire Temple is my favorite is because it was simple, straightforward, and fun. I also think that the Fire Temple is the best example in the game that a Zelda temple can be simple and straightforward, but still be fun despite that. This is also something that Nintendo in general has been doing very well since the 90s. Great, I'm pretty sure they got a lot better at it in the 2000s and forwards. I want to talk about the boss fights next. I know I said earlier that the combat in this game is very simple, but I still think it's important to cover them since they are something that you encounter a lot in the game. I liked the majority of the bosses, but there was a few that I didn't like, and those were Twinvora, that one being the one I hated the most, Big Octo, Dark Link, Dead Hand, and Morpha was meh. The reason I hated Twinvora was because of a few design issues. In the first phase of the boss fight, one of the sisters will shoot a beam at you, and you have to use the mirror shield to point it at the other sister. The problems with this are the fact that they both move around too much. They have to be floating right in front of you to hit them. The beam doesn't last long enough, and there's no good way of aiming the beam with the mirror shield. Even after I gave in and started standing on the 4 separate platforms, the sisters were still moving around too much, and almost every time one of them shoots a beam, the other one moves out of my reach. It was extremely annoying, and it took forever. The second phase was also annoying, unfortunately. In the second phase of the battle, the sisters become one person, and they will throw fire and ice at you. The goal is to get either 3 fire or 3 ice on the mirror shield, and then the mirror shield will spit that element back out at the boss, causing her to fall and be vulnerable to sword slashes. The problem with the second phase of this boss is that since it's RNG on whether fire or ice will be thrown, you could be waiting a long time to get 3 fire or 3 ice. You also better hope you don't miss one or accidentally grab the wrong one, because that will only extend the duration of the boss fight by a lot. When I did this boss, I got very bad RNG during the second phase and kept getting a ton of the other element that I didn't have in the mirror shield. I know I just said it's RNG, and I could be wrong on this, but I think she throws fire more often than ice. At least that's what happened in my playthrough. Granted, I am aware that it's probably coded in a way to prevent her from throwing 3 fire or 3 ice in a row, because it would make the second phase too quick, but the experience I got from it made it too long. I was waiting a very long time for the ice, and it did seem to move a little faster after I started going for the fire, but it still felt too long. My second most hated boss in the game is Dark Link. Look, Dark Link as an idea is cool, and his arena is cool, but the gameplay gameplay of his fight sucks. The whole goal is to just keep hitting Dark Link until he dies, and every time you hit him, he falls into the bottomless water void and then respawns next to you. You also want to kill him quickly because the longer the fight goes on, the more aggressive he gets, and he'll jump on top of your sword more often. You can also visually see it on Dark Link himself, since at the start of the fight, he's almost completely transparent, and at the end, he'll either be completely solid or almost completely solid, depending on how fast you kill him. The reasons I don't like this fight is because Dark Link is constantly backflipping and using his shield. He also jumps on top of your sword and can hit you after he jumps on top of it. He almost always jumps on top of your sword regardless of how far you are away from him. It seems like you just have to get lucky in order to hit him. And then the one time that you are actually able to hit him, Dark Link's sword will collide with yours, causing your attack to get cancelled out. I was just sad every time this happened. I actually got lucky and discovered that using the giant's broken knife works really well on Dark Link because he can't jump on top of it. So I was able to just keep spamming slashes on him. I also got lucky and was able to hit him very soon after he respawned, meaning Dark Link didn't get either any or very much time to hit me. I don't think I would have been able to beat Dark Link with the Master Sword or the not broken giant's knife. I'm really sad that the actual Dark Link fight sucks because an evil version of Link is a cool idea and his arena is cool. I hope Dark Link gets used again in another game, and that time around they actually make a cool fight with him. My third most hated boss is Big Octo. Big Octo is a very simple mini boss in the inside Jabu Jabu's belly temple. You and the boss are in this tiny circular arena with a spinning platform in the middle that has spikes on it. Obviously, if you touch the spikes, you get hit. The boss will run around the arena, essentially chasing you. Your goal is to hit him with the boomerang and then use your sword to hit his weak spot. The problem with this boss is that you have to spend so much time chasing him around the arena in order to be within the boomerang's reach of him. I literally spent several minutes chasing this boss around in circles while being Z-locked onto him, trying to hit him with the boomerang. Alright, I looked up a video to see how someone else did it, and they just took a hit at the start of the fight and pretty much just kept the boss stun locked the whole time. I guess I should have thought to do that, but whatever. Despite knowing the information I just learned from that video, I'm keeping this section in. My fourth most hated boss is Dead Hand. It's a mini boss that first appears in the bottom of the Well Temple. I hate this boss because of how lame the fight is. The enemy itself looks creepy and cool, but the fight is so basic that it's disappointing and just sad. Last one on the list is Morpha. I don't completely hate this boss. Like I said earlier, it's meh. The reason I find it mediocre is because there's not really any back and forth with this boss. It's just staying far away from his water tentacles and pulling his nucleus out of his water body with the hook shot and then hitting it with your sword. It's also a kinda slow boss. Granted, if I used the 4 platforms in the middle, it might have gone faster. I think it kinda sucks that this boss only requires 2 items to be used. Now that I think about it, most of the bosses in the game I think only involve you using 1 or 2 items at the most. I guess Morpho was the only one that I noticed it on. The second to last boss that I want to mention is Phantom Ganon. I do like this boss, but I did find it to be mildly, and I truly do mean it when I say mildly annoying, trying to shoot the real Phantom Ganon before he starts dropping his AoE electric shockwave bomb. Alright, this is the last boss that I'm going to talk about, and for the sake of my spoilers rule, I won't show my footage of the fight or say the name of the boss. The second to last boss in the game is dragged out. It's too long. It didn't need to be that long. They didn't need to make you and the boss play catch that many times or have to pass the ball to each other that many times either. Something I just thought about is that I feel like I should talk about which boss is my favorite. Sitting in my chair, scrolling through the wiki page, I don't think I can pick a favorite. I'm not even sure if there's one that I like enough for me to call a favorite. I guess as a substitute for this section, I'll just say that the final boss is cool, and it's a good final boss in my opinion. I enjoyed it. Alright, so this is a section that I am recording after I recorded everything else for the video, because I forgot I wanted to put this in here until after I recorded everything else. So I wanted to make like a short section about reoccurring enemies. I only wanted to mention one. I know there was more than one reoccurring enemy in Ocarina of Time, and I don't think I want to like do this for like every single Zelda video, and I don't think I want to point out every single reoccurring enemy in every single Zelda review, because that would just take forever, and I feel like that'd be a little annoying to do that every single time. But yeah, I found this spreadsheet from this Reddit post. It looks insane. I mean, I haven't read it at all. Other than that, it looks insane. And then there's also items. They did literally every item. I'm assuming they probably did literally every item in every anime, which is absolutely insane. But the thing I did want to point out was the dongos. I can't remember if it's dongos or denogos. I think it's dongos. So as you see, this is what they looked like on the Game Boy Color version, and this is what they looked like in the remake of Link's Awakening. By the way, it's Link's Awakening, and this is what they look like on the N64 version. So yeah, and then they're not called like Denogo snakes, they're just called Denogos in Ocarina of Time. But I thought this was just something I would point out. I have a feeling this is going to be a very common thing in the Zelda series, to reuse enemies, or to like take the name of an enemy and then make an entirely new like either model or enemy out of it, or you know, in this case, cut the name in half and then make an entirely new thing out of it. Because I mean, this thing has like it does not look at all similar to this thing, like at all. This thing is an actual like snake with a large belly. This thing is a lizard. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was interesting. I forgot to point out why I found it interesting, or why I bothered to point out in the first place. So the Dongo snakes in Link's Awakening were extremely annoying. They were a little bit more annoying in the Game Boy Color version, slightly less annoying in the remake. Basically, you just had to feed them bombs, and problem is that sometimes in most instances, you had to throw them from a different elevation than the elevation that the snakes were on. So it was kind of just this like guessing game of like making sure you throw the bomb in front of the snake so that it would actually eat it. And then, you know, you got this thing. All you gotta do is, I think you had to hit its tail is what it was. You know, just get around behind it, hit its tail, avoid its mouth, or, you know, use the shield and block it. And then also, I'm pretty sure it breathed fire, so you had to dodge that too. Much easier in Ocarina of Time, the N64 version, this iteration of the Dodongo. This iteration is much easier to fight, and it's also very different. Like I initially said before, not just in terms of like the model, but also the way you fight the enemy is completely different. You know what? I'm gonna start calling these things dodo snakes or dodo lizards. These will be called dodo lizards. These things are gonna be called dodo snakes. Why? Because I realized that the first 4 letters are dodo, yeah, like the dodo bird. So I'm gonna call them that. I know it's wrong, but the name, the word connection just popped into my head. So I'm gonna call them dodo snakes and dodo lizards. That's what their name is gonna be from now on. And then you got King Dodo, Infernal Dinosaur. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the world outside of the temples. You know, besides the section that I want to write about Hyrule Field and fast travel and the traveling between areas, I don't think there's much for me to say about the other areas individually. I like almost all of the other areas individually. I think they are cool. The only other thing I can come up with to say about them is that some people might find it disappointing that there's not much of a geographical difference between the world as Child Link and as Adult Link besides the marketplace. I personally didn't find that to be too disappointing, but I can see how plenty of people would find that to be disappointing. Also, the reason I'm not using my face cam for this section is because I forgot to record this section on whatever night I was wearing my dark green short sleeve shirt. That, or I did record it and I accidentally deleted it and didn't realize I deleted it. So this should be the last section that I record while I edit this video. Now, as for Hyrule Field, I hate it. I completely and entirely hate it. Before I say why I hate it, I should probably explain how Hyrule Field works. Hyrule Field is pretty much the hub for the different areas in the game. You go to Hyrule Field, and then from there you go to whichever area you need or want to go next. The reason I hate it so much is because it's a large empty space. In case you thought I was going to say flat, I can't really say that since it's not flat, but it might as well be. The hills and the up and down doesn't change the fact that it's still an empty space. When you have to walk through Hyrule Field as Child Link, it severely sucks. You'll first notice this when you have to travel to Hyrule Castle for the first time at the beginning of the game. As Adult Link, it's not nearly as bad since you have access to Epona, but even then, Epona is really only putting a band-aid on the issue. Look, I know it only takes about 3 minutes to walk from one end of Hyrule Field to the other, but it's an extremely boring 3-minute walk. If you're playing as Child Link, you are literally just holding forward until you reach your destination. At least with Epona as Adult Link, you have to keep pressing the dash button and sometimes jump fences. It's also just a very underutilized area. They could have done more with it and put more in it to make it more interesting, but they didn't. The only enemies in the field are the 2 spinning things near the entrance to the Kukri Forest, the enemies that spawn at night, and in some of the underground caves there's enemies. Speaking of the underground caves, most of them are useless. As for stuff to do in Hyrule Field, there's 3 pieces of heart, 2 gold skeletas, and technically 2 side quests. I say technically because the 10 Big Po side quest does take place in Hyrule Field, but the other one is the Happy Mask Shop side quest. That does not entirely take place in Hyrule Field. Just one mask requires you to speak to an NPC that is running around in Hyrule Field. That just proves how underutilized Hyrule Field is, which just makes the area worse than it already is. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the temple placement and the fast travel. Each temple has its own fast travel point, except for inside Jabu Jabu's belly, Ice Cavern, and bottom of the well. You would think that these would get used a lot, but they don't. The problem is that almost every temple in the game is not close enough to the village or civilized area that is within its domain, meaning that it's quicker to just fast travel to the Temple of Time or Lake Hylia and just go through Hyrule Field. This issue also adds to the amount of time you have to spend going through the boring field area. Most of the time I only use 3 of the fast travel points, those being Temple of Time, Lake Hylia, and the Shadow Temple. If I had to go to Gerudo Valley, I would just either fast travel to the Temple of Time or Lake Hylia and go through Hyrule Field because it's faster that way. Of course, that might be an unfair example since that's the only pathway you can take to access Gerudo Valley. A better example would be Kukri Forest. If I have to go there, what I'll do is either fast travel to Temple of Time or Lake Hylia and then just go through Hyrule Field to get to Kukri Forest. Getting there like that is quicker than fast traveling to the Forest Temple and then going backwards. This issue with the temple placement unfortunately made most of the fast travel points in the game useless. Now, this is where I want to tie Link's Awakening into. Link's Awakening had a much better overworld than Hyrule Field and Ocarina of Time. Now, I understand that they are very different, but hear me out on this. The overworld in Link's Awakening was not empty and it wasn't boring to go through. One of the reasons for that is because you didn't have to travel super far before you would reach a point of interest. Another one is because it had a lot of enemies all of the time. You also have to almost always make your way past obstacles in the path. There was also a ton of stuff to find in the overworld in Link's Awakening. These reasons are why Link's Awakening is a close second for me for right now, since as of posting this video, I haven't played all of the other Zelda games yet. The reason I'm bringing all this stuff up about the overworld in Link's Awakening is because Nintendo could have taken the ideas and what they've learned from that and applied it to Hyrule Field and Ocarina of Time. I think applying at least some of the ideas from the overworld in Link's Awakening to Hyrule Field would have made it a better location. Something I've realized is that I haven't talked about an area that I do like. I feel like I should talk about what my favorite area was and why it was my favorite. However, this section is being written several months after I initially wrote this script, so I'm going to be lazy and say that my favorite area is Lost Woods. The reason it's my favorite is because of the music. Lost Woods and Gerudo Valley are the two best soundtracks in the game, and for me personally, those were the only memorable soundtracks from the game, even as I write this section months later after initial writing. Then again, those two were also the loudest soundtracks in the game, so that might have had something to do with it. I think I should talk about the side quest at some point in this video, so let's talk about that next. I liked all of the side quests except for the fishing quests, Dampé's grave digging tour, and the 10 Big Poe side quests. Going back to the beginning of the video when I said I had 99.99% completion of the game, well, there is a heart piece that you get from the fishing quest, and there's a heart piece that you get from Dampé's grave digging tour. I decided to skip those two heart pieces because I had already spent way too much time on them, and it seems like they truly were intentionally designed to be ridiculous to complete. Off stream, I tried Googling how to do these two side quests, and it seems very evident that I'm not the only person struggling to complete these two. The reason I didn't like the 10 Big Poe side quests is because of the way shooting arrows while riding Epona works. The goal of this side quest is you have to kill the 10 Big Poes that are out in Hyrule Field, and to do that you have to ride Epona in the direction that the ghosts are going to be running away from you, and then you switch to your bow and you start shooting the arrows at the Poe. The problem is that once you switch to your bow, you can't control Epona anymore, which makes hitting the Poes difficult. It's also hard to hit them since you're moving and the Poe is moving. Those are the reasons why I didn't like the 10 Big Poe side quests. I can't think of any other side quests that I didn't like. I think I liked the rest of them. Oh wait, nope. Wait. I remembered another side quest that I didn't like. I didn't like the Singing Frogs side quest. This side quest is about matching the buttons that the frogs represent on your own ocarina. The problem with this side quest is how fast you have to press the buttons. I couldn't keep up with the last one and had to pull up a guide to see the button presses that I need to do. Then what I would do is start the challenge and look at the guide and then start matching the button combination. Not that this completely applies to the side quest section, but I really liked the NPCs in this game. I really liked the designs and their dialogue, despite the fact that most of them only have 1 or 2 text boxes worth of dialogue. Something I just realized that I haven't talked about is the ocarina. You know, the thing in the subtitle for the game. Anyways, it's cool. Basically, you use the buttons to play the ocarina, and there's songs that you can play on it, and each song does something different. The idea, the representation, and actual implementation of the ocarina is all good. I thought it was very cool. Something I want to mention before I give this stamp is that I like the N64 version of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and I'm excited to play the 3DS version next. Alright, it's time to give the stamp for this game. Wait a second. I already did that at the start of the video with the joke intro. What should I do now for the end of the video? I decided to skip those 2 heart pieces because I had already spent way too much time on them, and it seems like they They truly were intentionally designed to be ridiculous to complete. I think if done right, it could have and would have made the game more interesting. However, it's also fine the way it is. Yeah, I need to take like more like breathing breaks because I'm like, it's like I breathe in and then all the air is just like out of my lungs by the time I read like two or three sentences. It's crazy.